You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, the 20th of November. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, the influencer family we cannot discuss. And after the American election, no one wants to hear what celebrities think, but that isn't going to stop us insisting that they tell us. And are you in your Protective Hag era? But first, and I apologise in advance, Mia Freedman.
You're apologising for me.
Yes.
Fairly standard. In case you missed it, Lamar Odom bought a sex doll that looks like Khloe Kardashian.
Okay.
Would you like me to explain?
Yes, elaborate,
Yes.
please.
So Lamar Odom is Khloe Kardashian's ex-husband. I think he used to be a basketball player. He's the one that was found unconscious in a brothel, I do believe, and was very ill. And how do we know all these things? I know all of that against my will. Anyway, so Lamar Odom and Khloe Kardashian had a reality show together for a time. He's now out of the fold, but he can't let go. So he has admitted on a podcast interview this week that he has bought a custom sex doll that looks like Khloe. Here's what he said.
A sex doll that looks like your wife is about mental health?
For me, it would be. Yeah, for me, it would be. Yeah. I mean, it's sick, but I think we're all a little off, or a little weird, a little
Dude,
bit.
don't ever embrace your insanity.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's awesome. That sex doll, dude, does it look like her?
Yeah, they're going to make it to look like her.
How would you feel, Jessie, if your ex had a custom-made sex doll that looked like you?
So this is terrifying. Firstly, this is when we've reached peak podcast, is when we've got Lamar Odom talking about making a sex doll of his ex. I think probably that's enough information. But I feel as though it's so exploitative and it feels like having a souvenir of some kind of ex. It feels like your consent is no longer relevant because you then withdraw the relationship and say you weren't a good partner or whatever, and they can still have sex with a version of you. Like, that feels so sick to me.
I think he needs to talk to somebody, don't you? I think he needs to talk to somebody.
Ethically,
This
it's
is
really
not-
interesting, isn't it? The whole sex doll idea, these sort of life-size sex dolls that you can customize and, you know, they cost many, many thousands of dollars. But it could be argued, and I'm not saying this because, of course, we're making a bit light of it, but it's a creepy thing to think about, right?
Well, it's about ownership.
Yeah, I guess it is about physical ownership because part of me when I was mulling this over was thinking, how is it different to maybe being sexual while looking at an image or a video of someone?
Which is problematic in a different way, right? Like,
yeah,
if
but you
send-
can't police people's fantasies, right? If they're thinking
No.
about an ex while they're pleasuring themselves or having sex with someone else, that's up to them. But this is a different embodiment of it, right?
Takes AI to a whole other level.
Today, there is a story about an Australian influencer that we can't really talk about. And you're probably seeing headlines about it, and you either know a lot about it or nothing at all. Here's what we can tell you, and I'm going to explain the reasons why there's so much we can't say too. A Queensland social media influencer who is known for publishing videos about her child's illness and surgeries on TikTok and Instagram is being investigated by police for child harm. According to The Australian, medical staff raised concerns that she might have caused her toddler's unexplained illnesses. Queensland Police have confirmed that officers have taken action and an investigation has commenced. A spokeswoman said, "Police are aware of reports of child harm and this is an active investigation. It would be inappropriate to provide further comment." If you are wondering why details are scarce and why we are not stating her name, that is for a few reasons. The first is that no charges have been laid and these are all allegations. We are not suggesting that any of these claims are true. The investigation will likely take some time. The second is due to the age of the child involved. This case is especially sensitive given a child has been placed in foster care and the privacy of that child is of paramount importance. Today, we're not going to talk about that case specifically. Instead, we wanted to unpack the rise of Medi mums. And recently there was an article in the Washington Post about this. It's a corner of TikTok and Instagram where the mothers of disabled and chronically ill children share their parenthood journeys. And if you search the hashtag medical mums, you'll find videos of mothers doing a day in the life, footage of babies having their tracheotomy changed, or a trending song and it's got details of the child's disability displayed on screen. Here's some of what you might find.
We're medical moms. We know how much is in a syringe long after the numbers have worn off. We're medical moms. Of course we've spent major holidays in the hospital. We're medical moms. Of course we have every hospital department on speed dial. We're medical moms. We can't just find a babysitter. We have to find a nurse.
Come with me and my trach vent-dependent son to one of his doctor's appointments at the Children's Hospital. I always have to have somebody ride in the back with him in case he needs to be suctioned or something happens with his trach and he needs immediate assistance.
I want to make it clear that in terms of the allegations we referred to earlier, there is no community that is feeling more distressed than medical mums. These are mothers who dedicate their lives to caring for sick kids.
And who are already doing it so tough.
It's the single worst
hearts
nightmare.
Go out to all the women and fathers, but mostly medical mums.
Yep.
Many of whom will be part of the Out Loud community. And I know you're going to get to it, Jessie, but one of the things that's so instructive about medical mums and making content online, and to be clear, very few of these parents monetize their content. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
This is about your identity, which if you have a child or someone in your life that you are a carer for, it does become a big part of your identity because it dominates your life. And that idea of you can't be what you can't see, which is not true, you can be it, but you feel very, very alone if you don't see any reflections of the kind of life that you're living in the world on media and
it's
on
incredibly lonely. And that's what I wanted to unpack, because on the surface, and I've seen a lot of these comments popping up about what would possess a parent to film these moments or to share them. And I wanted to talk to you both about what the appeal is, because I had a grandmother who had an intellectually disabled daughter and then an intellectually disabled grandchild who she cared for full time. And one thing she spoke about was the profound loneliness of it and the difficulty in finding community. Even the school that those children had to go to, and this was 50 years ago for my auntie, was a really long way away. So it's not like you could establish any sort of community where you could speak to parents that were going through the same thing. Her day did not look like anyone else's day.
Yeah.
And the invisibility of that, to feel like you and your child are invisible, the only connection that you have is with medical professionals, which would have been so difficult. And so I look at some of these and I understand the impulse, and then I see the development of community. I can definitely see the use in that.
Absolutely. I think everything that you guys have said is true. You know, I know lots of medical mums and nobody's exploiting anybody. It's very much about being seen, because if you're on social media and it reflects so much of our lives, all the other people who are having these wonderful family moments and their kids who are having all these achievements at school and everybody's going on family holidays and everybody seems happy and healthy. And we all know that's not true. Like there's always a lot of shit going on behind the scenes. You feel completely out of that. Your life is so different. And being able to form these communities is life-saving, because if you've got a really sick child or a child with a chronic illness or a child with a disability, very often after the first sort of flurry of concern and support, people back away, because it is incredibly distressing to a lot of people to look at sick children. Like, it sounds so frivolous, but it's true, right? And so they kind of back away and they don't want to look. But if that's your life, you're seeing your reality reflected in this content that's being shared. And communities within closed Facebook groups are intensely helpful. I mean, I've found that myself on a very tiny scale when I was first dealing with, you know, being the parent of a neurodiverse kid. Going to those groups where everybody in there understood what you were feeling and they had tips and like it was very, very helpful and very, very validating. So I entirely see why medical mums are making content about their lives and forming groups. The conflict here seems to come, and there is some legislation in some parts of the world being formed around it, is if it's being monetized and if there are serious concerns about privacy breach, right? Now, the concerns about privacy breach is not exclusive to this group of parents. The concerns about privacy breach, it has to be said, is a growing concern around anyone who shares images of their children and any influencers, paid or otherwise, who use a lot of imagery of their kids. We've discussed it before on the show.
Issues around consent.
Yeah, and there's been legislation put in place in places like California from pressure groups who are saying we need to put laws around this because it's new and we've got to protect these kids. So that's not something that's specific to this group of people. But what is obviously very concerning is if those things are colliding and a child's illness or condition is being represented in maybe an untrue way for monetary gain.
Or there's particularly vulnerable moments. And this is something that in the Washington Post investigation, they spoke to a few children. They're now adults, but when they were children, they felt that their parents filmed them at their most vulnerable moments. So there was one woman who went by the name of Cam, and she said that in the wake of a really awful car accident, her mother filmed her injuries, preparation for a colonoscopy. It was that kind of stuff that was put on the internet. And she said that there's a real disconnect sometimes in that the parent isn't experiencing the disability. And so in portraying it, might not understand the sensitivities. And then there was another child who's now an adult named Catrielle Napolis. She said that she felt like parts of it, and again, this isn't going to a medical appointment, this was pretty vulnerable stuff that was shared. She was saying that it felt like a 19th century freak show. They're her words, where able-bodied people gawked at her. And it was sort of like looking at these instances. I think that their parents were monetizing as well, which made them incredibly uncomfortable. But then on the other hand, and this is what an expert said in the article, the complexity is that children can't advocate for themselves. So you've got really rare genetic disorders. You've got devastating disorders that need more publicity. Why do they need more publicity? Because publicity means funding. Forever, for research, whether resources. It's the project or Sunrise, they have always done stories about this.
Sick kids.
About sick kids. And the reality is, I saw one recently of a mother whose child, the NDIS can't support whatever resources this child needs. And if I was in that position, and if my child needed treatment or they needed some sort of resource and I couldn't afford it, I don't know what lengths I would go to. Like, I would probably be there, GoFundMe. Like, that's changed the game as well in terms of being able to ask for assistance when we know that disability and chronic illness can often have enormous financial ramifications.
And the other thing is that, again, there's just no blanket kind of approach you can take, because toddlers and little kids and being too young to consent is one thing. Then you've got kids who are tweens and teens. And one of my close friends is a medical mum, and her son's a social media star and he loves it. Like it can be really isolating to be a kid who is in a hospital a lot of the time or who isn't able to go to school, and making content and being online and sharing that kind of information about themselves. Firstly, try to stop a teenager or a tween from doing that. And secondly, that's normalizing for them as well and can pass the time.
And also, you know, with the most empathetic view on this, it seems that there might be some dark corners of this story, right? But the parents of kids who are unwell, living with serious disabilities, are doing it incredibly tough, as we've said, right? Why should they not get a little piece of that joy and validation that we all find on social media, right? Yeah, it's so easy to sneer at it, but having people tell you you're doing a great job, oh my God, that looks so difficult. Or you being able to make a bit of a funny joke, because we all know that when you're in difficult situations and with other people who are in those situations, you turn to like a sort of dark humor about it. Yeah. Why should you be disqualified from that joy and validation and community that other people are finding on the internet? Because, well, you shouldn't be making content about that. It's too serious. It's too bad. It's too this. It's too that. Yeah. It's like,
because we complain.
Aren't you allowed to have some joy too?
We complain about the sanitized version of life that we see on social media, right? So I think when you look at if social media is, and of course it's not, but if it's in any way a reflection of actual life, shouldn't it have different aspects of life? And not all of it is good news and not all of it is easy. And I also, from a empathetic point of view, Like even that little grab that we played earlier, I learned something. Like medical mums can't get babysitters, we have to book nurses. And it's like, I never thought of that.
Yeah. For most of history, we have had absolutely no idea how people with chronic illness and disability actually live, because it's a rule that you must be invisible. And so this visibility is in itself subversive.
Yeah, I think it's a positive thing. It's a positive thing for women who are, in the vast majority, the ones who are the carers for these kids. And there will always be, again, not referencing this story in particular coming out of Queensland, but there will always be exceptions to the rule. There will always be dark corners of everything. But I think that it would be a tragedy if we were to let cynicism shut down what is a little bit of a lifeline for some of the most vulnerable people in our community.
We tend to be very sneery about the idea that we get validation from likes and comments on social media, but for people who aren't getting very much positive validation in their lives every day, I don't think that's such a bad thing.
Out Loud, as we said, this story about the Australian influencer and the allegations around her is still unfolding, and there is a lot we can't say. And because of this, it's not really something we can discuss in the Facebook group for the safety and privacy of the people involved. So if your comments or if links are being declined, then just FYI, that is why.
In a moment, why everyone is telling celebrities to sit down.
Mamamia Out Loud!
Eva Longoria has left America. Trump is in and the Desperate Housewives star is out. Last week, she told Marie Claire, if he keeps his promises, it's going to be a scary place. It was like, does my vote really matter? Am I really making a difference? I truly believed in my soul that the best person wins, and then it happened and I was like, oh wait, the best person doesn't win. I get to escape and go somewhere. Most Americans aren't so lucky. They're going to be stuck in this dystopian country, and my anxiety and sadness is for them. Now, Eva, who was born in Texas but now splits her time between Mexico City and Spain, says that actually she's been living out of America for a while now because also her jobs are there, like she gets more jobs elsewhere. But here's the thing, and it's something that seems to be even more certain given what the next 4 years is going to throw up. When it comes to the next election, we will not be hearing about who celebrities want you to vote for. Celebrity endorsements were a very big deal in the recent US election. Democrats liked to say that they had all the good ones, all the big ones, and they did. They had Taylor Swift, they had Beyonce, they had Lady Gaga, they had Bad Bunny, they had Oprah, they had every single actor in Hollywood from George Clooney down. It would actually take you less time to say which celebrities did not come out for Kamala, but wait a minute, I can tell you a couple. Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, and a host of big-name influencers were called out in a piece in New York Magazine's The Cut after the election for staying suspiciously quiet, in inverted commas, about the election result.
Isn't it interesting, when we were looking at this to talk about it today, what jumped out to me was how different Australia is. Like, this idea that you have to declare and that politicisation of celebrities just doesn't happen here.
Even the term endorse. Like an Australian celebrity wouldn't say, I am endorsing da-da-da.
Can you imagine Kylie Minogue turning up to the launch of Albo's campaign?
And is that
or,
because...
Scotty Cam going to support Peter Dutton and posting about it on Instagram?
And is that because we have compulsory voting, the pushing people out to go and vote thing isn't as much. Maybe there's more of a sense that people will vote and they'll kind of, look at the policies and do what they want to do anyway. Even I was listening to Q&A on Monday night and they were saying that we quite like the idea that all the parties get the same amount of money to do their political ads. Whereas in the US,
our
it's
system's
private.
Completely different.
Exactly. So it's like you can spend $1 billion. Australia is horrified by that. We see it as an enormous waste of money because we've got compulsory voting, so we don't need as much kind of a push.
Yeah, but that's different. Like you can say, and in past years, celebrities have said enroll and get out to vote. But in America, certainly in our living memory, it's become part of your brand, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And it's kind of like all the cool kids are Democrats and like Kid Rock is a Republican.
Well, see, I disagree with you there. I think that what Trump did, and in fact what we might see politicians increasingly do, is extend and broaden what they see as a celebrity. So if you go to the YouTube sphere or you go to the TikTok sphere or even the Joe Rogan, who is incredibly famous because of the fracturing of fame. Who is incredibly famous and who has influence, I don't think are necessarily the same things. Like
100%.
Who needs a celebrity telling you who they vote for when you've got podcasters?
But the thing is, clearly, until right now, everybody thought you did. Because remember, we spent a long time discussing whether or not Taylor Swift was going to come out for Kamala. And when she did, everyone went like, yeah, that's going to change the dial. Bad Bunny, and there was so much commentary saying that he might be the one person who could really move the needle in Puerto Rican communities after the derogatory comments that Trump's team had been making about that community. None of it worked at all. In fact, there's a very large school of thought that's like it harmed.
Remember when Jennifer Aniston came out after JD Vance said about single cat ladies? And it was like, oh, it's all over now.
Yeah.
He's picked a fight with America's sweetheart.
But I have a little bit of sympathy for the celebrities, right? Because they're being told at the minute that it's probably their fault that, you know, Kamala lost because no one wants to hear from you elites, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, we don't see Joe Rogan as an elite, even though he's probably richer than all of them put together. We don't want to hear from all you elite people, never mind how rich Donald Trump is. You are part of this. But at the same time, we are always shouting at public figures to tell us what they think, right? So the story in The Cut that was like, oh, why hasn't Kim Kardashian declared how she feels about politics? What a traitor is the kind of vibe. And look at all these shallow influencers who are still just posting about their lipsticks and their what I had for lunch today instead of that the world is ending. They're getting a lot of shit. And we're endlessly making, you know, demands of public people to tell us what they think. But then when they do, we go, how embarrassing for you. Why do you think we care what you think? And that seems to put the influence in a really tricky position. Can you win it?
The celebrities that came out did nothing to challenge the Democrat brand or the Democrat problem of being seen as elitist or authoritarian. Like those things which are thrown at them, to then have a whole lot of really rich people who don't even live in America all the time, come out and say, I'm voting for Trump. I've never had my position swayed by a celebrity on something like this because the average American is thinking your life doesn't look like mine. You're not impacted by the same things.
It used to be that a celebrity, hence the reason that advertisers and big brands would always pay a celebrity tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to endorse their car, their coffee, they're the original influencers. Because
isn't
it was
low
just
stakes?
It's just whoever they stood next to, the brand equity that they had as a celebrity would shine onto that car, that coffee, that politician. But what's interesting is that, you know, remember it was all about I'm with her, with Hillary in 2016. And then this is such deja vu for me because after that it was said again, oh, that didn't work because Trump had nobody. So he's been forced. I take what you say, Jessie, in terms of he's gone and found podcasters and other people and Hulk Hogan. That's because he couldn't get anyone, right? Because you would be shunned from Hollywood if you stood next to Trump and said, yeah, I'm with him. But so it all happened after Hillary. She had all the celebrities and then everybody went when it was the 2020 campaign. I was reading a lot about that. And Joe Biden's campaign was like, hey, celebrities, shh, that didn't work. We're having no celebrities. Just please don't say anything. Please don't come out on social media. And then somehow all of that was forgotten again in the rush of excitement when he stepped aside and Kamala took the nomination. And then suddenly on the night, and again, this isn't the reason why she lost, but the night before the election, it was like the big concert and Katy Perry was there and Gaga singing and crying at a piano and Oprah and Beyonce and J-Lo. And interestingly, the only people who were kind of also conspicuous by their absence, I don't know if they're in this article, Meghan and Harry. I wonder, because they would have wanted to be on that bandwagon. Sorry, that's cynical. They would have wanted to express their support. I imagine they would have said, hey, we're available. And they would have been told, thanks.
You know, it's funny, right?
Sit
Because
down.
there's cultural cachet involved in having all of those people on a stage. But the analysis I keep reading,
that's the thing.
well, what culture? Like, I think that's the analysis I keep reading is you are the dominant culture and we are voting against that. So all you're doing is reinforcing what we don't want. I also think that we have never had more people telling us what to think and how to think. I get it on my TikTok. I get it on my Instagram. I get it from people that like we've
on this podcast.
All such a politicized moment
Yeah.
that when a celebrity comes out, it's like this incredible fatigue. But then I understand the bind of the celebrity Silence is violence. We've heard that. And if you do not endorse, if you do not state your opinion on something, it will be written for you. I saw this in the comments of everything. It was like...
And it happened to Taylor Swift once. Like before she did come out and start telling everyone she was a Democrat, the reason that she did really is that because as a person with her roots in country music, everyone was assuming what her politics were, and that was infuriating. And she was like, that is not what my politics are.
Which I want to throw that out. The idea that silence means that either you're complicit with something you're ashamed of is so, so wrong. I mean, silence can mean a million different things, but if you've chosen not to speak about something, you might just not think that your voice is helpful on this.
Don't you think it's interesting in Australia, though, because I keep coming back to why it's different here. It's seen as no one else's business. It's seen as something really private and personal who you vote for. Like, I don't know, I think I know who you guys vote for, but I can ask someone anything. Do you have a vibrator? But asking someone who are you voting for, even I know that that's a line that in Australia I wouldn't cross.
Yeah.
We are having as well bigger conversations about, and I think that this is resistance I'm feeling within Australia. We've had, whether it's referendums or plebiscites, there is this resistance to like, I don't want my bank telling me how to vote. I don't want my football team telling me how to vote. I don't want my shoe brand telling me how to vote. We don't like the idea that everything is political. We want spaces that aren't.
I agree, but to explain how we got to a place where everybody thinks that they do have to nail their colours to the mast, I think culture moves quickly, right, especially at the moment. We used to be very irritated by people who had just shown us their handbags and their kitchens and their lipsticks and being like, why aren't you using your platform for good, right? Shine your light on a cause that matters to you. And
especially women.
Yeah, especially women, but also, you know, we demanded that level of service because it was like seen as paying back almost. We give you our money to go and watch your movies, to listen to your music, to go to your concerts, whatever. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing with that? We don't just want to be making you rich for no reason. So that was a real push. And also, to be fair, celebrities have always had to do that. They choose charities to support. They're literally shining their spotlight on things that matter to them. So if we live in a world where that's what we've always expected people to do, when they seem to be keeping their spotlight on them, that felt icky, you know, and we were like, but can't you see all the problems that need fixing and your voice could help fix them? The problem is now we're just so saturated, as you've said, Jessie, with everybody telling us all the time what they think, what they care about, their stance on everything. We're just like, shush. And now we're annoyed. Who do you think that you are to tell me? And I think that it can be a bit whiplashy probably. The other thing that's really different, Mia, and you've already touched on this really, is the point of the celebrities at all those Democrat things, especially the not so public facing things, is to attract donors and raise money, right? So Clooney and Julia Roberts and all those things having Democratic functions in LA for rich people to come together. They will come if they know Clooney's going to be there and they might get to shake his hand. They'll come if they know that Gaga's the act performing at halftime, like, you know, in between entree and main or whatever, and you raise more money and all those things. So again, our political system working so differently protects us to a point. There are still obviously donors to major parties, etc. Protects us to a point against having to do that.
And you used to get more cut through. You know, the biggest media cut through of anything in this campaign, it's been measured. The first thing was Joe Rogan. The second thing was Donald Trump cosplaying, working at McDonald's. They're the two things that got the most cut through. And the third was call her daddy. And everything else was like crickets and daylight. But I think the other reason that it's become harder, and I wonder if we'll see celebrities back off politics for other reasons, is that now that it's so polarised, it used to be like I grew up with one of my parents voting for one party and another parent voting for another party. And they used to have sort of political arguments, but now it's become, if you don't vote for who I vote for, you're evil. If you don't agree with what I believe in, you're evil. It's not just that you're different. And so when you've got these big celebrities, I think that there's also a big reality check for them when you look at what's just happened and that it has been a landslide for Trump and that well over half of the country thinks he's great. If you're positioned as saying, basket of deplorables, I'm with her, he's evil, suddenly your box office, your album sales, your ticket sales are all impacted. And I know that sounds really craven and really materialistic and capitalistic, but we live in a capitalistic society and they also are business people.
Well, that's why Kim Kardashian doesn't tell you.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that Kim Kardashian has her opinions, for example, and we know that her children, because their dad is Kanye West, were actually got in a bit of trouble for posting their own Trumpy kind of propaganda, even though at the age of 8. But anyway.
Are we owed knowing
well, that's the thing. But Kim
Kardashian
Kardashian is a savvy, whatever you think about her, she's a very savvy woman and she will work with who will help her get things done. So she famously went and visited Trump when he was the president to talk about prison reform. And she also went and spoke to Vice President Kamala Harris about that too. She will work with the system that will get her cause the most, so she's not a nail your flag to the post kind of person.
Maybe she also just didn't vote.
But also, well, I'm sure she probably did. But also I think she's thinking in a more transactional way about politics rather than an emotional way. And it seems like most Americans are feeling exactly the same way. She's probably more in touch with how the most Americans are feeling than Clooney.
There was a great quote in The Guardian that basically said a celebrity endorsing a candidate is much more likely to get people to change their minds about a celebrity than it is to change their mind about a candidate, which is very true.
Well, thanks for the feedback.
Great. I'd love your feedback.
What a gift.
Guys, I have some feedback. We know that feedback is a gift, and my feedback is for the iPhone, but also for Facebook, which I guess is our good friend Mark Zuckerberg. I want them to stop with what can only be described as an assault of memories. I don't want to be thrown a memory every time I open my phone. I'm shown some picture from 2 years ago. I'm not emotionally prepared. It's the same with Facebook. I'm served a status from 12 years ago, an image with someone I'm no longer friends with.
How do you feel about when people send you their memories if you're in their memories?
At least that's real. At least that's a human connection.
No, I mean that they just take a screenshot that they've also been served by their phone or by Facebook. This happened 3 years ago.
I will allow that.
I like that.
It's the robot of it all. It's the fact that I am just trying to check the time.
Yeah.
And I am delivered a slideshow of my dead dog at 7:22 a.m. on a Monday. I'm not emotionally prepared for that.
You need a trigger warning, love.
I hate it. And then apparently everyone says, go to your settings. Go to your settings. There's something you can do.
Oh, I feel that's not okay.
It's victim blaming.
I have a feedback for settings. They're too complicated.
They are. And I don't want to be changing my settings. I just want to bitch about my phone and what it does.
Oh, no, I'd like to change my settings, but my feedback, it's...
I don't know how.
Have you ever tried to change any settings in Facebook? Good luck, babe.
Yeah. Well, do you want to know? Apparently what you're meant to do is go to settings, apps, photos, and then you turn off show featured content.
Oh, that's in photos.
Yeah.
I'm old enough now, though, that I like it when I get sent a picture of one of my kids really little. I always screenshot it and send it to Brent, and I'm like, look at the little baby.
Oh, no, I feel that's a punch into my heart.
Yeah, I
love
think it's sad.
I can't handle
I
it.
don't like the passing of time. I don't like it.
After the break, we unpack the Protective Hag era and whether you have one in your life or maybe it's you.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, we drop new segments of Mamamia Out Loud just for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get your daily dose of Out Loud, and a big thank you to everyone who is already subscribed. Friends, you may not want to classify yourself as a maiden, a mother, or a crone, famously the 3 ages of a woman. But what about Protective Hag? There's a newsletter by a writer called Poona Bell called As I Was Saying, and I received it this week, and it is about her Protective Hag era. And she tells this story about going to a barbecue with a bunch of people were there, and she said there were sort of 2 groups of conversations that she was part of. She said either she was being asked for advice around certain things, and the dynamic was like she, as the older person, advising a younger person. She's in her 40s, Poona. Or she was sort of overhearing passively the conversation take place from the women around her and thinking, oh, this is so familiar. I've heard this so many times before. They were talking about situationships and cheating or stingy partners or alcoholism and relationships that had gone on for too long without commitment or wanting kids with people who didn't want kids and frenemies and baby showers and how expensive they were. And she said it's not that those things don't happen when you're older, but it's the way in which they were being discussed by these young women. And she said the tone was kind of adult and all-knowing, but they were all sort of mystified about how they'd gotten themselves into this situation.
So all of those things were things she had experienced before. So
Correct.
Suddenly she was in a position of being the wise one.
Well, she wasn't always being asked for advice, although sometimes she was, acknowledged as the elder. A lot of the time the conversation was just going on around her and she was kind of bored because it's like, oh, and she realised that she was the oldest person there. And she was saying that it was like she was on one side of the fence peering over to a previous version of her life where she was baffled by all of those things that had happened. And she noticed that it's not that the situation that they were in was their problem, it's knowing what the solution was. She's like, as you get older, you've experienced this stuff again and again, and you're able to quickly spot red flags and patterns. So you're less likely to, if you fall into them, you get out of them quicker, or you're like, oh, well, here's what you do. She talked about this feeling of being a protective hag. And I loved this idea of this reclaiming of the word hag, but she said that it was moving into another stage of womanhood that sort of combines giving no fucks and, she said, wrestling. And she talked about the hag era is like when you realise you're outside of it, you've graduated to this new tier and that you're just going to conserve your energy and realise the difference between when people are asking for advice as opposed to just needing you to listen.
Okay, so I understand the hag bit. What's
Yeah.
the protective bit?
So we were on the way into the studio today. I saw someone sitting with a blanket around them, in the common work area. And we've got, a bunch of blankets around and sometimes people are just wearing them if the air conditioning's up too high. And I was like, "You're cold, sweetie." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm freezing today." And I'm like, "Where Holly and I were just sitting over there near the window. It's really warm. Go and sit over there."
So I see
You
a
know what I mean?
protective hag as having a cushiony bosom. Like
Yes.
a cushiony that I can
Yes.
rest my head on. And I seek out.
Wanting to protect younger women
Yeah.
from either physical situations or emotional situations, and
Yeah.
Holly's putting her head in her hands.
So, Holly, I'm going to tell you twice recently where I have sought out a protective hag. And I'm using this term because this woman gave me permission to say protective hag.
Yeah.
The first was I got a tsunami period when I was in Greece and I had nothing to use, right? And I was in a bathroom. And I instinctively was like, you need a protective hag. I wasn't going to go to a 20-year-old. I wasn't going to go to someone my own age. What I needed was an older woman who understood, who had been through some shit and would find me a surfboard to put in my underpants.
Yeah.
And I found that. The second, when I was on the plane with a baby on my own, I needed a protective hag. And a protective hag held my baby while I went to the toilet because she knew what she was doing and I trusted her. Holly, will you be my protective hag?
No, absolutely fucking not. You're on your own. My problem with this is there is so nothing new about it, right? We have always cast women in general, whatever phase of the life they're in, they get an outsized share of you look after everybody else and put yourself last, right? That is a cliche. We all know that to be true. Whether that is you will organise the office birthday cake or whether that's you won't go quickly to the loo and get back to the interesting conversation you were having, but you will fucking go and find Jessie a pad and put your whole night on pause for 10 minutes.
Some of us are selfless. Holly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. And the thing that happens as you get older is that expectation just intensifies because what are the old ladies for, right? They are no longer the main characters, as Mia often says. They're not breeding. They're not doing all those things. So what are they for? In fact, for a very long time, anthropologists literally couldn't work out what postmenopausal women were for because
Neither can Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah,
They worked
exactly.
that out, yeah?
Because humans and two types of whales are the only living beings that go through menopause. Every other species, once they can no longer reproduce, they die, right? So all the anthropologists throughout time were like, why don't the women die when their periods stop? And then they went, aha, it's because they're the grandmothers who will care and sweep and stay at the hearth while everyone else goes out fucking and breeding and hunting and gathering, right? I reject this. I'm in my hag era, but I'm in my selfish hag era.
Okay.
I'm like, not literally, because at home I still have small children and I have to be protective of them. But am I going to mother all the young women in the office? No, I'm going to be like, you date that fuckwit. You find out what happens. Like, that is
I'm
my
not protecting you.
position.
Okay, I have a different reading, which is I went deep on like croning, which is apparently a ritual rite of passage in feminist spiritual circles. You would like this, we should do a croning with you both, where you are moving into an era of wisdom, freedom, and personal power.
Yes.
That's me.
So there's a
So don't get in my
rereading.
way with all your needs.
Yes. So even, and I think that there's just, I remember learning in ancient Greek mythology or something, there was something called the Delphic Oracle. Have you guys heard of this?
No.
It was on the side of what is now a road in Greece. And the Delphic Oracle was this woman who would just sit there with a silly hat on and give you premonitions. So if you were like going to go to war, then you would go to the Delphic Oracle and be like, hey, do I go? And she was just an old woman who was high. She was hallucinating. There were gases and stuff. And she would just say, yes, no.
Oh,
Like,
we could do that.
I reckon that that's what you guys are all about. That reminded me of you. Holly sitting in a like silly little fortune teller hat, just me coming to you with advice and you fucking with me a bit. I don't think you're giving me the right advice.
I like to do that with Em Vernham. My favourite thing is Em Vernham comes and asks me advice about things and I like to steer her in the wrong direction and see what happens. That's fun. Like,
See,
that's good
that
time.
is what older women have always done.
My friend Paula, I'm so glad I've learnt this term because it describes her so much. She has this weird innate radar that has just come to the fore in the last year or two where she can spot mothers in trouble with little kids.
She
new
found
mothers in trouble.
found my sister in trouble in
She
Bondi
found
Junction.
your sister in trouble in Bondi Junction, and she didn't even realise it was your sister, but she saw someone who had a crying baby who was, I can't remember the circumstances, and she went over and she said, do you need me to hold the baby? Are you okay?
That's what she does. She just goes and
And
susses
Claire
them
looked
out.
up and went, and there was another time she was driving along the side of the road. She saw a woman pushing a pram with a baby and she just knew that something was wrong. She pulled over. She said, are you okay? The woman was crying. The baby wouldn't sleep. She was just having a bit of a bad moment. She just gave her a little hug, just sat with her for a minute.
See, that's lovely.
That's lovely. Holly wouldn't do that. But I like this idea of I feel protective suddenly over younger women.
Yeah.
I do. I feel physically protective of them. Like I will stand between a young woman and I think that part of that is when you no longer care about the approval of men. You're past that age of, you know, I'm not currency to men anymore. So my well-being does not rely on the beatific nature of men. I don't need them for my physical protection and I don't need them for my emotional or financial stability. Therefore, she talks about decentering men in your life. And I think you can only do that at a certain point in your life.
That all
you know?
makes absolute sense, right? And there is no question, although I won't necessarily hold your crying baby, I always smile and encourage and tell mums they're doing a good job. Oh, yes, sweetie, you're doing great on the plane.
That's protective.
Do you want to hold my baby? No.
Not really. Not especially, no.
But that's protective hag.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of protective hag in me in that I'm always going to be on the young woman's side,
But you're
if
fighting
you
it.
like. But I just resent the fact that whatever phase of life we're in, it's like, no, it's not about you. You are here to help everybody else.
To serve.
And older women in particular get pushed into that place just at the moment when often they are able to do things for themselves, right? For the first time, because maybe caring responsibilities have backed off a bit or whatever, or they're in a better financial situation. And so they're like, I'd like to go back to uni. I'm going to learn yoga. I'd like to travel around Australia in a van. I'd like to leave my husband and go and sleep with a hot toy boy like Nicole Kidman or whatever we were talking about the other day. It's like, no, because really you're here to make sure everybody else's life works well. No.
There is a scholar who has researched the crone, and this is a definition she's come up with. And Holly, I want to know if this is you. A crone, and I think that this speaks to the superpower of older women. The one who sees far, who looks into the spaces between the worlds and can literally see what is coming, what has been, what is now, and what underlies and stands behind many things. They represent the ability to see more than with just one's eyes alone, but to see with the heart's eyes, with the soul's eyes, through the eyes of the creative force and the animating force of the psyche.
I think that's me. I don't think it's Holly.
No, I don't see what's coming. It's usually just like right
See,
in front
I'm a
of my
protective
face.
crone over Holly as well. Who was the one that got your HRT script
Oh,
filled?
you're very good at that.
That was my mission.
Yeah.
I'm protective.
You know what protective hags love? Is asking if your baby should have a cardigan on. Protective hags think your baby should have socks on. Tell you that.
Definitely.
I don't think that's protective hag. I think that's a bit controlling, judgmental old lady.
That's that's it, friends. We're out, protective hags or not.
I'm off to find Jessie a surfboard.
Yes, you are. And I'm not. I'm off to get my needs met. Thank you very much. A big thank you to all of the Out Louders for listening to today's show, and to, of course, our fabulous team for putting it together. We're going to be back in your ears tomorrow.
And before we go, it's been a big year, to say the least, which is why on yesterday's subscriber episode, Jessie, Amelia, Lester and I took a little glimpse into what have been the glimmers, our favourite glimmers from the year, the pockets of joy that we found in our lives. It was the most beautiful episode to record. It really made me walk away feeling all warm and cosy. And Amelia texted me afterwards to just say how meaningful it was.
It got quite deep.
The beautiful words that I said.
You know when Mia weirdly says nice things sometimes? She did that.
I did.
Wow.
It's because I'm
That's
a
because I
protective
wasn't
hag.
there.
Yeah.
Have a listen. Amelia, you coming back has been such a glimmer for me this year because you're just around the office sometimes. And it's like, because we pretty much haven't seen each other for 10 years.
Yeah.
And now it's like we have our regular monthly dinners, but then also you're just around. And the other glimmer for me still on you is just watching you glimmer. Like watching people discover you in a way that I always have, because you've always been there. As always, there will be a link in the show notes. Bye.
Bye.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.